I think the intentionality provides the focus on the outcomes of what you're trying to do, and not just basically get buffeted by the winds from the day to day.
Welcome to Navigation and Discovery with Cameron Singh. On today's episode, we have Wade Troxell. And Wade used to be the former mayor of Fort Collins out here in northern Colorado. Wade is also currently a professor at Colorado State University, and he is also remains a community leader within northern Colorado. So I've had the honor of getting to know Wade over the last few years, and we talked with Wade. I had talked with Wade about his experience in politics, his experience in education, and to just gather insights from him on the things that he's learned and the things that he's learning today. So I really hope you gain some variety of insights, not only from someone that's been in politics, but also someone that is in education and working with students. And also we'll touch on some leadership lessons that Wade has learned. So hope you enjoy this podcast interview with Wade. Well, thank you so much, Wade, for being on the podcast.
Great to be here, Cameron. Thank you. Great to join you.
For sure. So just to let the audience know, Wade and I met a little over a year ago. We've known each other now, and Wade has been awesome getting to know you over the last year or so, and really appreciate our friendship.
Likewise, Cameron. You're quite a young leader, and I appreciate meeting with you. I know you have great things in your future.
For sure. Thanks. So Wade, give the audience a little bit of insights about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Fort Collins, so Fort Collins is my hometown. I went to Poudre schools, and along the way, I played football. Then I went to Colorado State University and was on the football team there while I majored in engineering science and graduated with that in 1980. Had a short stint with the Broncos, long snapping. And then I started my master's. And after I finished my master's, I worked at Kodak in Windsor for a couple of years, and then had a chance to come back for my PhD at Colorado State Mechanical Engineering. And when I finished that, I did a postdoc at University of Edinburgh in their Department of Artificial Intelligence and working on intelligent robotics. So I continue to work in that space in terms of intelligent control distributed systems, and that also includes UAVs and autonomous vehicles, as well as just what is intelligence and how do you control real physical systems.
Well,
And
awesome.
yeah, so that's my
Yeah.
educational background. Been on the faculty for 30 plus years in mechanical engineering, and then my foray into politics, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah, so let's move on to that, Wade, because talk a little bit. So you were the former mayor of the city of Fort Collins, and that's in northern Colorado. For those that are listening outside of Colorado. So tell us a little bit about you. You have an extensive academic background. Your involvement is your education is fairly well diverse, in my opinion. That is, and you got to the point of being the mayor of Fort Collins. So take us into a little bit of that journey, how that was to your journey really into politics.
You bet. Well, I'm glad to. And so I was serving as associate dean for research and economic development in the college. And I was approached by a number of folks in Fort Collins community to run for city council, and I did. This was in 2007, and for a council member position, District 4, which is Southwest Fort Collins. I ran and I won, and I ran 2 terms, was term limited there, and then at the end of that, being council member, I ran for mayor and ran for 3 terms and won each time, and it was term limited, and stepped down in April 2021. So I'm the recent past mayor of the city of Fort Collins, the 56th mayor of Fort Collins. Fort Collins is the 4th largest city in the state of Colorado. It's a wonderful community, and Along the way, and part of being mayor, I served as chair of what is the Northern Colorado Regional Airport, and I also served as the chair of Platte River Power Authority. So a number of responsibilities there that impact our future, and always took a very much a forward-looking view of Fort Collins. The reason it's a great place that it is not by accident, but really intentional leadership in the past. And I, part of the story, but not all of the story, is when I was 14, I served as mayor for the day in Fort Collins. For then Mayor Carl Carson, he was challenged to a race by the ASCSU, the student body president at Colorado State University, and he accepted and made me mayor for the day. So I did this 15-mile race, and on behalf of Mayor Carson. And Mayor Carson is always an inspiration to me, and so I think about that introduction, if you will, fondly, and I think that might have played a role in my awareness and but also my commitment to a civic service in our community, and that's really the primary reason I ran.
Awesome. And then tell us a little bit about your background in the field of education.
Yeah. So I did my bachelor's, master's, and PhD. My first degree was in engineering science and bioengineering. And then my master's was in mechanical engineering. It was a project that I had funded that was part of my senior design project and was funded towards my master's. And I was a TA and research assistant during that time. And I also then I went to Kodak, and that was a formative aspect of my development because of working in industry and really having context of real deliverables and expectations, and that also helped focus me on. It was on high speed automated equipment and focused me on robotics at what I did for my PhD. And I came up, my dissertation is really a generative form of AI planning for robotic assembly. And I then did the postdoc at University of Edinburgh in both intelligent robotics and the Edinburgh Designer System. So supporting design with an AI underpinning, if you will, and been working in those areas for my career as it relates to my research, and as a faculty member, I've worked with, I've always been outward facing. A program that started was what is now the Manufacturer's Edge, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership that started in Colorado and Wyoming, and so I've always had this orientation towards real private sector, real businesses doing real things that are meaningful, have value, and so I've always brought that to my work here at the university.
Yeah, and now you're at Colorado State University, and what would you say kind of led you in that path of really staying in that education space?
Yeah, well, I think it was in my blood. My father was a faculty member here at Colorado State, and so I knew that literally growing up, um, and I really had the opportunity to stay in Fort Collins and raise my family and get married here, and we just celebrated our 42nd wedding anniversary. So, very fortunate to see Fort Collins, I think, become even a better place. When I was born, it was 20,000 people. Now it's 177,000 people, so 8.5 times. And again, it's not by accident. It takes real leadership. And I tried to bring that to our council, where we worked as a team, and as a council, as you all know, or are elected, and they come from all different backgrounds and so forth, but really thought fundamentally that if we're working well together, we're serving our community better. So really brought the notion of high performing teams to our council, and really try to lift and focus on the future of Fort Collins, not just next year, but 30, 50, 100 years, because that's really the role of a local government.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch on that more a little bit about your experience as the mayor and in politics in Fort Collins. Is what were some of the leadership lessons that you learned through that journey and experience?
Yeah, I had a number of takeaways from that. And, I think one of them was, what's the real problem we're trying to solve? I would be in a work session and there'd be somebody from the city staff presenting, and frankly, it wasn't even clear what we were trying to accomplish. It was clearly a lot of work and a lot of effort, but it was, what's the problem we're trying to solve? So one of the things I notice is many of the issues that come before city council are not necessarily Fort Collins issues. They get parachuted in from the outside for whatever reason, and we have to have the discipline and the discernment to understand what's important to the future of Fort Collins, and some of those things that we can just let go. I think that's an important part of leadership, is simply not, you know, always feeling you have to do something to look busy, but really you have to be intentional about those things that are meaningful for your community. So I think, that's one item that what's the real problem we're trying to solve, and not just jumping to answers. I see that so many times where we jump to answers, but really don't understand and understand what the problem is to be solved. And oftentimes that there isn't one. And so, I think that's one of the things that you always have to be cognizant of. Another thing I think is endemic to local government is what's what's the biggest barrier to the future of a lot of local governments is average thinking. Should be exceptional thinking. When you're building 30, 50, 100 years out, you should be thinking about the greatness of your community, just not filling potholes. And clearly, there are those things that are very operational day to day that you need to do well, and you should do them best in class. So really have ability to measure at whether it's the police department, the fire department, or the streets department, or the transport, or what have you. There should be something to garner what's best in class, and what is that? And it isn't necessarily what's happening up and down the Front Range or across the state. It's not even in the United States. It should be best in class in the world. And what we're trying to do as a municipality, it's clearly not a lack of resources. It's usually a lack of leadership about being exceptional and working towards that end.
Mm. Oh, that's awesome. You mentioned intentionality, and I wanted to touch on that a bit. Um, and this doesn't have to be just centered around your experience in politics, but more towards our listeners. Why is intentionality so important in just our day to day, and especially in leadership?
Well, I think the intentionality provides the focus on the outcomes of what you're trying to do, and not just basically get buffeted by the winds from the day-to-day endeavors. And clearly there is a lot of winds and turbulence at times, but the focus is where you're going, and making sure you have that larger bearing. So I think one of the things in the leadership is oftentimes your head is down so much in doing the day-to-day sorts of things, and you really need to lift your head up and look to the horizon. Are you on the right trajectory to the outcome that you want to accomplish? If you're not, then you need to recalibrate and get on that course. But a lot of times I think people get caught up in the day-to-day, but not necessarily the where you going point of view. I think that's important, as to where you're going. And then, as I mentioned, many things come, to a community that may not be part of your community, and having the discernment. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And having that discernment and ability to say, that isn't an issue that's for our community, even though it might be a wonderful thing for some community somewhere else, but usually they find their way to Fort Collins and parachute in, and it's not really something that we need to address.
Well, awesome. Wade, you get the pleasure of at CSU interacting with a lot of young people and students and a wide variety of ages. When we're talking about leadership, leadership is so much needed within our younger generations because now I'm noticing that young people are just on the fast track to leadership, and sometimes that could be good, but also that could be bad. But what now, speaking to the younger listeners on the podcast, what type of encouragement would you provide when it comes to that trajectory towards leadership? What advice would you like to give in that space?
And the classes I teach are mainly design classes, so they tend to be team projects. And so talk a lot about working in teams and so forth, and individual roles and so forth. But one thing I fundamentally believe is everyone's a contributor and everyone is a leader in various ways. Leader isn't necessarily someone that's in the front of the band or just someone that likes to think they're the leader. It's not the boss person necessarily is even the leader, but everybody is a leader in various ways, and everybody needs to be all in on a particular team, and part of that is not only the assertiveness of doing something, but that's an important part of leadership is doing something, but it's also offering grace and so forth in that role. My definition that I use, and I've borrowed it and modified it a bit from Marshall Gantz. Marshall Gantz is a lecturer at Harvard Kennedy School, and this is the definition I use: is leadership is accepting responsibility to create conditions that enable others to achieve a shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. And so it's really not, a leader is not about yourself. Servant leadership obviously is not about oneself, but serving others, but it's really bringing out the best in others to achieve a shared purpose that we're all trying to accomplish together. And in this divided world, we see a lack of leadership, I think, and instead of real leadership that is really leading, whether it's a community forward or an organization forward or a business forward or even a family forward. It really takes leadership and accepting that responsibility to create those conditions that enable others to achieve a shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. So that's, and I think part of that is also what's the motivation, the motivating factor. I think it can be one of three things. One of motivation can be one of anger, so do this kind of a mentality, and that motivates to some degree. What about another form of leadership is anxiety? Really, oh no, I don't, bad things can happen, and that's another kind of motivation. But really, the motivation that I ascribe to and really think more about is the leadership of awe. What can be the possibilities, and really thinking about the opportunity and thinking about the benefit to all. And that's where in our community, I really talk to all in the city of Fort Collins, and really lifting the level, and also lifting the arbitrary constraints that many place on themselves or placed on by others. And really it's they tend to be artificial and not real. They can be felt for sure, but it's really up to us to create a sense of awe and the possibilities, and allow the great human spirit to take over, and to do wonderful things.
Hmm. And Wade, I know you probably experienced this as mayor and in your political time that you're in politics, is sometimes you're trying to get a message across, but people are not on board, right? You're trying to go against the grain, you're trying to be visionary, but people just are not seeing it. So how did you get your message across and cast that vision and help people understand your perspectives
Yeah.
to get everyone on your council on board?
Yeah, well, and they're all individuals, and they're there different motivations why they're there, and what I would try to do is one more possibility, and that's that sense of awe, and in where everyone can see their benefit in it. It isn't necessarily the benefit that I see or necessarily I'm trying to push, not at all. It's really trying to create an environment that, from whatever perspective someone's coming at it from, they see themselves and their benefit in it. And it really should be, if they're motivated, for the betterment of our community. And unfortunate, there's times when people, I don't believe it's for a benefit of our community and for all in our community, but
Mm.
it might be for some. And I think I saw this, you see a lot of times, is I think issues are oftentimes, whether they're political issues or just general cultural issues, are really set up to be adversarial. Um, I don't know if you remember the old Miller Lite commercial of less filling or taste great as a false choice. It's really, let's have a beer. Let's come together and share that, instead of taking the framing that's often given to us in terms, are you for it or against it? And what I would do is, when an issue is often framed in a way that, what are you? And I would frame it in a way that I could be full throated in support of it, but it isn't necessarily the framing that comes your way.
Mm.
So,
And
and be full throated and advocate and argue from that perspective, which at the end of the day, I think is honestly the right way to go.
yeah, I've seen several issues where, when you go and cast vision, is people stay kind of a bit small-minded on the minute topics or minute
Yep.
issues, and then they lose sight of the bigger picture. It's like you have a city to run, you have a
Yeah.
community to build, you're planning for the next 50, 100 years.
Right. And I think part of that intentionality is having priorities. There's never infinite resources. So I think you have to prioritize and be intentional about those things that are important to your community. All too often I see, it's happening now in Fort Collins, where they're going after tax dollars, where they haven't even prioritized the services that they're currently providing. We used to do budgeting for outcomes, where there was an outcome we were desiring, and that's how the budget was built, based on the available resources. And if some fell below the line, and if they didn't meet the priority of the outcome of our community, then they shouldn't be necessarily funded in the first place. And so I think there needs to be that intentional approach to prioritization, and what is the highest and best use of the resources that we do have, and not simply think it's a largesse, and we never have enough, and feel that the thing is I think there's a lot of places that if you're not high performing, there's a lot of waste in the system, and that's not good for our community, nor its citizens.
Awesome. Well, as we wind down, Wade, with the podcast, I wanted to touch on one more thing: is getting involved in the community that you live in. I'm a huge champion of it. You're a huge champion of it, being born and raised in Fort Collins and heavily immersed and very well known person in the Fort Collins community. So with those listening out there, there's people that have jobs, families, and may not think getting involved in their community should be a part of what they do. So provide some insights on why should people or care or even get involved in their community that they live in.
Right. Well, I think that's a fundamental right of our kind of government, and our society is really our responsibility to our community, and giving to our community one way or another. I tend to see that members of our community are very generous of their time and giving to various boards and nonprofits, and programs that are beneficial to our community, and that's laudable. I think we also have to take responsibility to our self-governance, and responsibilities that we have to our city, county, state, and federal level, and participating actively in all of those as well. I think and it should be for the best interest of those in our community. And that's the one thing I enjoyed about being mayor, is it does have direct impact on people in our community. the kinds of services that are provided, the kinds of the thing that I love to hear. Just I would do undercover mayor, and I'd just go listen to community members out and about, and I would hear, I just love Fort Collins for this reason. It's that share of joy, and Peter Kageyama is for the love of cities. It's not the big things that necessarily make the community great, but it's a lot of little things. People making it a special place, going around a corner and seeing something that's just makes you smile and enjoy it at the time, a sense of place. And so, I think there's so much that everyone can do from whatever their capacity is in their community. But I think ultimately that we all have a shared responsibility to our form of government and giving back to our community and to the organizations within our community.
Oh, awesome. This has been a really good conversation, but I wanted to I do a lot of these rapid round questions just so our audience can get to know you a bit better. So, we'll start off with what is it that you're reading today, or where do you like consume content?
Very good. I have been reading a lot about leadership just because I believe that that's important and getting the best ideas that are out there. Also, I would say that's probably well, and also things I think related to one's health. A great book on breathe and how the impact of breathing, something so innocuous as breathing, but how critical it is to our health and to our. And I tend to take a systems approach and a view of things that I do. So just these things that we tend to compartmentalize and think of when you begin to think of their interplay with, in this case, your body or as it relates to someone in their community and the impact across the community. There's many things that go beyond just an individual, and those are important to understand and appreciate as well.
Mm-hmm. And then, what's one bucket list item?
I look forward to when I have two kids. They're both married and doing well, and look forward to when they have children. So I'm looking forward to grandchildren at some point. So that's probably my next bucket list. I should share my last bucket list item that I was able to share with my son, who graduated with his PhD from Cornell, and I was able to hood him in that graduation ceremony. So that was a bucket list item for me for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. And then lastly, um, dead or alive, who would you have lunch with?
Ah, you know, um, I've always been fascinated by Abraham Lincoln, the challenges that he had at the time he had them, and his foray into becoming elected, and just his life and his legacy. Very fascinating man, and I think we can continue to learn from so much of Abraham Lincoln's legacy.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Wade, for being on the podcast, and thank you so much for our continued friendship. And thanks again.
Thank you, Cameron. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Well, I thank you so much for tuning in to Navigation and Discovery with Cameron Singh. I really hope this interview with Wade added value to your journey of life, wherever you're at, that you're able to gather from different people from different walks of life. So Wade is from politics and education, and I really hope this added value to you and you were able to have some awesome takeaways. If this is your first time subscribing to the podcast, feel free to subscribe on whichever platform you're listening on. I release the podcast every Tuesday on a weekly basis, so you'll get a notification whenever the podcast goes live or the episode goes live. And there's also a YouTube channel. You can find the YouTube channel in the links and the podcast description on whichever platform you're listening on. And you can also subscribe if you like watching videos of the podcast episodes as well. And if you haven't gotten a copy of my book, Navigation and Discovery, a path of navigating and discovering through your journey of faith. This is my first book that debuted just about a year ago, and if you want to get your copy or find out more about the book, you can go to my website, CameronSingh.com. I'd greatly appreciate your support. And also, if you think someone else might need to hear this message of navigation and discovery, feel free, you can gift them a copy as well. Thank you again for tuning in to this podcast, Navigation and Discovery with Cameron Singh. I really hope that you're enjoying the guests that I'm bringing on and having these conversations with. So thank you again, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.